At the wedding, Ethan's secretary had replaced all of our photos with pictures of just the two of them. I became the laughingstock of the entire venue. Ethan, on the other hand, stood up for her. She was just joking, he said. I had already given him 3 chances. This was the last one. I smiled and said, "Fine, no wedding then." Ethan and I had known each other since junior high. It had been 13 years now. In the 7th year of our relationship, he finally proposed. It was a romantic night. Fireworks lit up the sky, dazzling and dreamlike. Ethan knelt in front of me under the colorful bursts, the glow of the fireworks casting a soft light over his handsome face. "Lily, can I be your family?" he asked. I was sobbing too hard to speak. I had waited 7 years for that one sentence. That's why I cared so deeply about our wedding, scheduled a month later. I took half a month off work just to plan it carefully, pouring my heart into designing the wedding I had always dreamed of. But on the wedding day, the big screen didn't play the video I had spent 3 nights editing. Instead, it showed photo after photo of him and Grace, skiing down snowy mountains, surfing the ocean, bungee jumping off cliffs. Together, they had conquered one extreme sport after another. Anyone watching would have to admit, they looked perfect together. I had no family, not many friends either. Most of the guests were Ethan's relatives and friends. Someone finally broke the silence and asked, "Wait, isn't that woman not the bride?" That one sentence was like a rock thrown into a pond, splashing loudly, stirring ripples of confusion. Murmurs quickly rose all around. Curious, nosy, mocking glances all turned toward me. Wearing my wedding dress, I stood blankly in front of the screen, searching for Ethan. He was standing next to Grace, a look of surprise on his face. When our eyes met, he instinctively stepped in front of her, shielding her from my view. I stood frozen. In that moment, something inside me quietly began to rot. I met Ethan in 8th grade. With his family background, he had no reason to transfer to a regular junior high in a backward little town like ours. Later, after we got to know each other, he told me he'd been sent there after getting into fights, so his grandmother, who didn't want to move to the city, could keep an eye on him. She was the only person he truly listened to. Before Ethan transferred in, I didn't have a single friend. My name was Lily Jo, and my role in the family was to obey and take care of my little brother. In 7th grade, I made plans to hang out with a new classmate one Saturday. My mom ran into us on the street and exploded. She stormed over and hit me, yelling at my classmate for taking me out to play and leading me astray when I should have been at home looking after my brother. My classmate cried, and by the next day, the entire school had heard the story. No one wanted to be friends with me after that. I sat alone in the corner of the classroom like mold creeping up a wall, something people avoided for fear it might spread to them. Everyone steered clear, except for Ethan. One day, he slammed his backpack down on my desk and said loudly, "I'm sitting here now. Let's be desk mates." Ethan was wild and bold, afraid of nothing, like the world could fall apart, and he'd still hold it up with one hand. Before the high school entrance exams, I was depressed. I knew these would be my last days at school. My parents had already decided they would send me to work at a friend's business as soon as I graduated, to earn money for my brother's future house and marriage. Ethan thought I was just anxious about the exams. He kept coming up with silly ways to cheer me up. "You're top of the class," he said. "Your future's solid. What's there to be anxious about?" One day, I couldn't hold it in anymore and broke down crying. I told him I wasn't going to be able to continue school. Ethan went silent for a long time, then patted my head with a big grin. "As long as I'm here, I'll make sure you stay in school," he said. He begged his father and promised to work hard in high school, in exchange for my freedom to study. He even gave my parents 500,000 yuan. When I finally got my acceptance letter to the school I wanted, I looked him straight in the eyes and said solemnly, "No matter how badly you hurt me in the future, I'll always forgive you." Ethan just shrugged it off and laughed. "What are you talking about? I treat you great." He returned to the city for high school, enrolling in an international school next door to mine. He came to see me all the time. His friends used to tease us constantly. I would just blush and look down. He looked flustered, like he didn't know what to say. That time he was walking me back to the dorm, and out of nowhere he asked, What do you think about what they said? I didn't react right away. What do you mean? He suddenly exploded, scratching his head and fidgeting like a monkey. I'm so good to you, what do you think I mean? I stammered, well, I'm only good to you too. I was so shy I didn't know what to do. I sped up my pace. Let's talk about this after graduation. Ethan caught up with me, a silly smile on his face, light and cheerful as always. You said I'm not allowed to be good to anyone else. After the college entrance exam, we naturally started dating. Even when he studied abroad, he'd fly back home whenever he had a break. Over 4 years, he saved up a thick stack of plane tickets. My college roommates used to say we made them believe in love. After college, Ethan returned to the country. We lived like any normal couple. For 3 years, I was completely immersed in happiness, in sweetness, until Grace appeared. Grace was the new secretary Ethan had just hired. I first met her one night when Ethan came back from a business dinner. He had clearly had too much to drink, and he was leaning against her for support. Grace was beautiful. Big round eyes on a doll-like face, the kind of look that felt instantly warm and likable. She smiled brightly and said to me, "Hi, Miss Zhao. Mr. Ethan had a few drinks. I brought him home. He hasn't drunk this much in a long time." Feeling worried, I rushed to help him up, but with his eyes closed, Ethan brushed my hand away. I froze, staring at my hand suspended midair. Then Grace whispered into his ear, "Mr. Ethan, you're home now." Only then did he lazily open his eyes and fall into my arms, nuzzling his face into my neck. "Babe," he mumbled, sticky and sweet. That odd, uneasy feeling I had moments earlier scattered in an instant. I turned to Grace. "Thank you for bringing him back. I'm Mr. Ethan's secretary. It's my job," she said, sounding a bit embarrassed. "Oh right, Lily, I just started. The previous secretary left very suddenly, so I haven't had time to learn all of Mr. Ethan's habits yet. Can I add you on WeChat? In case I have questions, I can ask you, please?" She put her palms together in a pleading gesture. She looked so sincere I couldn't refuse. I nodded and added her. I helped Ethan wipe down and change into pajamas. The next morning, just as I finished cooking porridge, he woke up and hugged me from behind. "Babe, you're the best," he murmured, peeking over my shoulder. I gently pushed him away, a little embarrassed, and asked, "Why did you drink so much last night?" Ethan sat down casually and replied, "Grace can't handle alcohol. She helped me block a few rounds." My hand, mid-motion, hesitated for a second. A thought crept into my mind. If she couldn't drink? Then why did he take her to a business dinner? In the end, I didn't ask about work. I'd never interfered with his job. I trusted him and didn't want to question him over something that could have just been a petty hint of jealousy. Grace messaged me on WeChat a few times, normal stuff, like how much sugar Ethan liked in his coffee or which foods he avoided. Her questions all seemed perfectly reasonable. It made me feel like my earlier suspicion had been unfounded, and I started to feel guilty for ever doubting her. I answered her questions patiently and thoroughly, until something happened on my birthday that made me sense something was off about how Ethan treated Grace. That night, he got off work early and came home. While I was blowing out the candles, he sat across from me, looking a little distracted, occasionally glancing down at his phone. When I finished making my wish, he was still staring intently at his screen. He looked like he had just encountered something devastating. I couldn't hold back and asked, "Ethan, what's wrong?" With a loud creak, Ethan suddenly stood up. His chair scraped sharply across the floor, making a screeching sound, but he didn't seem to notice. He grabbed his coat and rushed toward the door. "Lily, there's a situation at the office. I need to go check it out." His urgency made my heart tighten. If he was in such a rush, it had to be something serious. I grabbed the edge of his jacket, worried. "What is it? Do you want me to go with you?" "No need." He pushed my hand away without even turning his head. The door slammed shut behind him. He didn't glance back at me once. After he left, I stayed in the living room, unable to calm down. I didn't want to disturb him, so I only sent a few short messages now and then, asking if everything had been resolved. The elegant birthday cake slowly began to melt. The clock ticked past 11. He still hadn't replied. Was he really that busy? I opened WeChat, intending to ask Grace what had happened at the company, but I accidentally tapped into Ethan's moments. At 9 p.m., he had posted, "So unlucky. wiped out hard while skiing. The post included a picture of him lying in a hospital bed with a cast on his leg. 9 p.m., that was exactly when Ethan had rushed out of the house. My heart skipped a beat. A strange emptiness swelled in my chest, as if something terrible was about to unfold. Just then, he updated another photo in his moments. This time, it revealed the corner of a man's suit jacket, black, clearly expensive, and the wrist resting on the bed's edge wore a black watch. It matched the pair with the one on my wrist. In the caption, Ethan complained, said he didn't need anyone to stay, yet won't leave. Some things never change, even after coming back home. It felt like someone had struck me in the head. My mind went numb and ached with confusion. Had they known each other since they were overseas? Why hadn't Ethan told me anything? I opened the chat window to ask Grace, but instead of typing, I accidentally tapped on her profile. She immediately messaged me. "I'm so sorry, Lily. I just found out tonight is your birthday. Are you okay by yourself? Don't worry, I'll ask Mr. Ethan to come home right away." A few minutes later, she sent another message. "Lily, he won't leave." Ethan didn't come back until the next morning. I had spent the entire night sitting on the living room couch. When he opened the door and saw me, he looked startled. "Why are you sitting out here?" I lifted my head, my eyes bloodshot. "Where were you last night?" Ethan walked over and crouched in front of me. "Didn't I tell you? Something came up at the company. I went to the office," I said softly. I added Grace on WeChat. His eyebrows twitched. That calm expression of his began to unravel. The next second, he let out a long sigh, raised his hands in mock surrender, and tried to lighten the mood with a half-joking tone. "Sorry, babe. I lied to you. Grace and I went to college together. She helped me out when I was studying abroad. Now her family's all still overseas. She broke a bone last night and was alone in the hospital, so I thought I'd go check on her." "Then why didn't you tell me?" I asked. He gave a sheepish smile. "I didn't want you to overthink it." He should have known better. It's exactly because he kept things from me that I started overthinking. I looked him in the eye. "You hired her as your secretary. Was it because of her ability or because you went to school together?" I deliberately emphasized the last 4 words. "Of course, because of her ability. I swear there's nothing personal about it. Babe, you have to believe me." What he didn't realize was that, as he spoke, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. I knew him too well. I could spot every sign of his guilty conscience. Ethan had told me 3 times before, "As long as I'm here, I'll make sure you can keep studying." And I had promised to give him 3 chances. No matter what he did, I would forgive him. So I chose to pretend I didn't see the guilt written all over his face. I forced myself to play the blind one, wrapped my arms around him, and said, "Last night was my birthday. You promised you'd be with me every year. Don't ever leave me again." Relief spread across Ethan's face, and he smiled lightly. "Yes, ma'am." But he didn't keep that promise. Half a month later, he left me behind again. We were living in a high-rise apartment downtown, a place Ethan had bought. It wasn't far from both our offices. When he first returned from abroad, he insisted on driving me to and from work. But soon, we both got tired of it. The traffic was awful. I preferred my electric scooter anyway. 15 minutes, door to door. After what happened on my birthday, maybe he felt guilty. He volunteered to start picking me up again. I didn't refuse. We were both tiptoeing around, trying to patch up that invisible rift between us. He kept it up for about 2 weeks. That afternoon, he messaged me saying he had a business dinner and couldn't come get me. When I read it, I actually felt relieved. Even if it was raining and I had to wear a poncho and ride my scooter, that was still better than sitting in the car in heavy silence, pretending nothing was wrong. His attempts to make amends only made me more uncomfortable, because it meant he had done something that needed to be made up for. And I didn't want to be reminded, again and again, that in a moment when he had to choose between me and someone else, he left me. That evening, just as I was leaving work, my supervisor suddenly called out to me. He'd been transferred to our department about a month ago. Compared to our last manager, who was easygoing and funny, this one was quiet and composed. We had even secretly counted. He hadn't smiled more than 10 times in a whole month. The happiest we'd seen him was the day the operations team switched our afternoon drinks from coffee to milk tea. Our company didn't really have a culture of working overtime, but I'd worried he might bring that over from his last job. To my surprise, instead of assigning me work, he asked, "Has your boyfriend been picking you up lately?" I didn't like talking about personal matters with coworkers, especially not with a direct supervisor. I responded politely, "That shouldn't affect my work, should it?" Peyton nodded and then casually turned his phone toward me. "True. But funny thing, I actually know Ethan. We went to college together. We even went skiing once." I wasn't prepared for the photo that appeared on the screen. In it, a man and woman were locked in a close embrace, both wearing matching ski suits. Ethan was smiling broadly, that confident, youthful grin he always wore when he felt like he owned the world. He had Grace in his arms, and from every angle, they looked just like a couple in love. Then what was I? Some kind of joke? A crushing wave of grief rolled through me. I couldn't breathe. My hands clenched around the photo, my body shaking uncontrollably. Outside, the sky was dark and heavy, as if it might collapse at any moment, pressing down on my shoulders until I felt like I might break. So that's how close they had been, when I wasn't around to see it. And that made all the lies I had told myself these past weeks feel pathetic. My act of turning a blind eye, of pretending not to hear or feel, suddenly seemed laughable. Peyton looked at me with a trace of pity in his eyes. They were pretty close in their sophomore year. I always heard Ethan had a girlfriend back in China. I just didn't realize it was you. My voice was hoarse. "Why are you telling me this?" He could have easily said nothing, just pretended he didn't know. I had seen plenty of men who chose to stay silent when their friends were cheating, this unspoken brotherhood of complicity. "Why couldn't you just stay quiet?" I asked. Behind the lenses of his glasses, a flicker of confusion passed through his dark eyes. I warned Ethan, told him it wasn't right. When I didn't respond, he looked slightly regretful and asked, "Should I not have told you?" "No," I said. "I'm grateful, really. Can you send me the photo?" He tapped his phone and sent it to me. Without even looking up, he added, "Don't let this affect your work." As I waited for Ethan to come home that night, I found myself thinking back over our 4 years of college. Were there ever signs of Ethan's shifting heart? Yes, there were. But I never once considered them. I trusted him completely, wholeheartedly. When he first went abroad, he carried my class schedule with him and would call me whenever he had a free moment. He could spin a conversation out of the tiniest things. I don't know when it started, but at some point, our conversations grew shorter and less frequent. When he returned to visit me, we would sit face to face and struggle to fill even an hour with things to talk about. I remember being anxious at the time, wondering if the different paths we were on had created a distance too wide to bridge. If we had less and less in common, how could we continue like this? I told him my concerns. Ethan smiled and reassured me, saying that just being able to sit quietly together was already a kind of happiness. But sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and catch him grinning at something on his phone, completely immersed. There was even a time when his school had a shooting incident. I saw the news alert early one morning before class. Terrified, I slipped out to the hallway and called him. It was around 9 p.m. where he was. Ethan didn't answer. Panic surged through me. Was he hurt? Was he even alive? I curled up in a corner, crying while frantically calling him again and again, even looking up how to apply for an emergency visa. An hour later, he finally picked up, sounding groggy. He told me he had fallen asleep. He hadn't been in danger and hadn't told me anything because he didn't want me to worry. After the call ended, I sat in silence, hollow inside. I remembered how, back when he first left, he once burned his hand while cooking, and still called me to tell the story, chatting for half an hour. When had I stopped being the person he shared everything with? Back then, I hadn't even questioned the sound of running water in the background. Hadn't wondered what it might mean. It was late at night when Ethan finally came through the door. Our eyes met. He seemed to sense something and instinctively took a step back. That tiny movement pierced me like a blade. And he knew how strange it looked too, because he quickly forced a casual smile and asked, "Why are you still up?" "Who did you go to dinner with tonight?" I asked. Ethan's face tensed. "Are you overthinking things again?" "Am I?" I said quietly. "Or are you just feeling guilty?" I placed the printed photo on the table, His brow lifted in surprise, and he snatched it up. Where did you get this? I wanted to laugh, but nothing came out. Does it matter? His first instinct was to question me, not explain. That said it all. Ethan rubbed his nose awkwardly. It's just a photo. Why are you making it such a big deal? If I took a picture like that with some guy in college with his arms around me. I didn't even finish before he cut me off, his expression dark. You would never do that, he said, chest rising and falling quickly. Just the thought of me doing the same made him furious. His double standard was glaring. If this kind of thing bothers you so much, I asked, why did you do it? Or were you dating him at the time? Ethan was furious. What the hell are you talking about? It was just a photo. The day before, there was a shooting on campus. We were under a lot of stress. He was comforting me. We went skiing, and there were a lot of people. I was just closer with him, so we ended up in the same spot. If you were under pressure, you could have told me, I said. He snapped back without hesitation. What's the point of telling you? Would you have come? You're always busy studying, busy working, busy trying to make money. Where do I even rank in your life? Would it matter if I told you? I stared at him in disbelief. I couldn't believe those words had just come from his mouth. I thought he knew. I thought he understood that everything I did was for our future. I'm not like him. I have no backup plan, no safety net. I can't afford to slow down, even for a second. I was always the first person at the library and the last to leave. Every moment outside of class was filled with part-time jobs. I had to repay the 500,000 yuan his father gave to mine. I wanted to stand beside Ethan proudly, on equal footing. Last year, I handed that 500,000 to him personally. I thought he understood. I was rebuilding my self-respect. Ethan froze when he saw the tears streaming down my face. Regret clouded his expression, deep and heavy. I'm sorry, I said, pushing away the hand Ethan reached toward me. My chest felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, tight and aching, making it hard to breathe. The tension in the living room thickened like frozen air. Just then, Ethan's phone rang. He glanced at me, hesitating for a second but still stepped back to take the call. I heard Grace's voice come through the receiver. My leg hurts, she said. Ethan's body tensed. Then I heard him reply, wait for me. He was going to leave. Clutching my chest, I whispered weakly, Ethan, I don't feel well. If he had just turned to look at me, he would have seen how pale I was. But he didn't. He didn't even take an umbrella. He slammed the door and left. Maybe we both needed space to calm down. The moment the door closed, I collapsed onto the floor in pain. My vision darkened. I could feel death approaching. A sudden, overwhelming sense of danger surged in my chest. I can't die. I dragged myself out of the mud of my family. I had earned a respectable degree. I had a job I loved. I couldn't die here. I crawled across the floor, reached for my phone, and called 120. I stammered through the address. When the dispatcher confirmed help was on the way, tears poured down my face. Lying on the floor, I called Ethan. Please pick up, I begged. Didn't you promise never to leave me? I'm scared. I don't want to be in the hospital alone. It hurts. It hurts so much. He didn't answer. Eventually, I gave up. Back in my senior year of high school, I had long suffered from malnutrition and academic stress. One day, I fainted while walking upstairs. My mother came to the hospital, took one look at me, and the first thing she said was to yell at me about the pile of unwashed clothes at home. Stop pretending to be sick just to get out of chores, she snapped. When she learned there was a medical bill to pay, she slipped away while the doctor wasn't looking. Ethan covered all my medical expenses that time. He showed up with a stack of worksheets, grumbling the whole way. As long as I'm around, don't worry about anything, and don't get mad at me for being blunt, but your parents are actual garbage. You're sick and they still made me bring homework? What are you, made of caffeine? How do you push yourself like this? Then he handed me chicken soup made by the housekeeper. This stuff's loaded with nutrients. Drink it all, or I'm flipping this hospital room. He brought me 3 meals a day, treating the hospital like his second home. He practically moved in. By the time I was discharged, I'd gained 5 pounds. Ethan was thrilled. He pinched my cheek and said, guess all those late nights I spent researching pig farming techniques finally paid off. I was so touched, I swore, Ethan, if you're ever hospitalized, I'll bring you food every day too. He laughed, hugging me. Don't jinx me. I was deeply grateful for how he cared for me. I knew his dad had pushed him to take the IELTS exam, but his procrastination had gotten the better of him. So I made time to study with him. In March, we took the test together. I scored an 8, he got a 7, beating the goal his dad had set for him. He was so excited he spun me around in a circle. "You're my lucky charm," he shouted. Being a bookworm who'd never been lifted off the ground like that, I clung to him in shock. Ethan blushed and trembled a little as he wrapped his arms around me tighter. We stood under that tree, holding each other for 5 whole minutes. Neither of us said a word. We didn't need to. It wasn't awkward, it was beautiful. That memory flashed vividly before my eyes, and warm tears slipped down my cheeks. A cool touch wiped them away. When I opened my eyes, I was already in the hospital. Ethan's eyes were red. "I'm sorry, Lily. I didn't know you were really sick." I stared at him blankly. "But I told you." I said I didn't feel well. Tears spilled from his eyes as he repeated over and over, "I'm sorry." The doctors told him I had collapsed from extreme emotional stress. After that, Ethan stayed in the hospital with me for a week. He even moved his work into my hospital room. I didn't welcome his presence, but I didn't push him away either. He completely ignored everything. It was as if none of it had ever happened. He went on, stubbornly trying to patch things up, throwing warmth at a wall of coldness. Even the nurses quietly told me, "Your boyfriend really treats you well." The day before I was discharged, Ethan sat on the sofa and suddenly shoved aside a mountain of paperwork. "Ugh, I'm so done. I don't want to work anymore." In that instant, a memory echoed in my mind. Ethan back in school, tossing his test papers aside, whining at me, "Lily, I don't want to do practice problems." Something inside me stirred. Without thinking, I called his name. "Ethan?" He rushed to the side of the hospital bed, eyes wide. "You're talking to me?" He wrapped his arms around me and kept apologizing over and over. "I messed up. I never should have kept anything from you. Grace and I are just friends, I swear. I don't like her. I only like you. Please believe me. I already fired her. I promise from now on, I won't have anything to do with her." "I shouldn't have doubted your love for me," he said through his tears. "How could I not know that you're the one I love most? Please forgive me, okay?" He cried as he said it. His love for me looked genuine. There was nothing fake in the way he held me. But can a person really love 2 people at once? When he held Grace that way in the photo, so intimately, was he truly unmoved? I let him hold me tightly, and softly, next to his ear, I whispered, "This is the second time." "The second time for what?" he asked. "Nothing," I replied. "It's fine." Ethan cupped my face, his eyes glimmering. "Lily, I just want to be with you. No one matters more than you." The day after I was discharged, he proposed to me. I said yes. And yet, when I took the ring, in addition to feeling happy, I was also struck by a strange question. Was he proposing out of genuine love or out of guilt? When Grace showed up at the wedding, I got my answer. It was guilt, and it never lasts long. I tore off the veil I had picked after visiting more than 10 bridal shops and walked slowly toward Ethan. "What's going on?" I asked. Ethan said, "She just wanted to see our wedding, so I gave her an invitation." His lips twitched a little, but he still chose to step between me and Grace, blocking my line of sight. "Don't be angry, Lily. She was just joking. Let's go on with the wedding, okay?" But how would Grace even know we were getting married? Obviously, Ethan had still been in contact with her, behind my back. I wasn't sad. What I felt was a long overdue sense of relief. I handed Ethan the veil I had so carefully chosen, smiled, and said, "Sure, go ahead. I'll leave the venue to you two." A flicker of smugness flashed across Grace's eyes, but the next moment, they filled with tears, as if I were bullying her. "Lily, I'm sorry," she sniffled. "Mr. Ethan said he was worried the ceremony would be too quiet, so I played a few of our old photos to liven things up. I didn't know you'd be this upset." Ethan's face turned pale. "Lily, Grace isn't like that. She didn't mean anything by it." I shot him a cold look. "Use your pig brain for once. If I showed intimate pictures with another man at our wedding and said it was just a joke, would you accept it? Anyone who can do something like this is either brainless or plain trash. And you," while they were distracted, I stepped around Ethan, grabbed Grace by the hair, and growled, "You're both. Do you know how long I spent planning this wedding? You disgusting snake." As Grace shrieked in pain, I slapped her across the face hard. Ethan rushed to pull us apart. Lily, what are you doing? To everyone who knew me, I was always the calm, gentle one, so much so that it bordered on cowardice. I'd never even raised my voice at someone, let alone hit them. But that's only because no one had ever crossed the line. My heart was big. I could tolerate a lot. But not this. None of them mattered anymore. My heart was small too. Only a few people had ever been allowed in, and now there was one less. I let out a cold laugh. You're trash too. Under the stunned gaze of everyone present, I walked up to the big screen, removed the engagement ring, and held it up under the spotlight. Wish me well. As of today, I'm single again because my ex-fiancé and his secretary ruined our wedding. They really are a perfect match. Let's all give them our blessings. I started clapping. Scattered applause followed, mostly from my teary-eyed roommates. I gave them a grateful smile, then casually tossed the ring aside, gathered my gown, and walked toward the exit. Lily. Ethan scrambled to pick up the ring. I didn't look back. Every step I took was firm, resolute. When I got into the taxi, the driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror, then silently handed me a pack of tissues. Wipe those tears, sweetheart. No man is worth crying over if he treats you like that. That's when I realized I was crying. I wiped my cheeks and whispered, "These are tears of relief." 4 years ago, I had shattered the chains of my toxic family, piece by piece. From that day on, there was no more Judy Jo, only Lily Jo. And today, I left another toxic relationship behind. The process was far from perfect, but the outcome felt right. When Ethan came home, I was packing the last of my things. Most of what was in the apartment belonged to him anyway. I only took my clothes. He grabbed my suitcase, confused and angry. Where are you going? You've already made a scene at the wedding. Now you're running away from home too? I looked at him calmly. Let go. Where are you going to live if you leave here? That's none of your concern. I already rented a place. His eyes widened. When? The day after my birthday. There wasn't a hint of hesitation in my voice. After he abandoned me to stay overnight at the hospital with Grace, I took the morning off to look at apartments, signed a lease by noon, and went back to work in the afternoon. I never thought of telling him. Maybe deep down, I already knew this day would come. Ethan looked completely lost. Hurt and confusion spread across his face. Why, Lily? This apartment, this place, we've lived here for 3 years. It's familiar. The cozy living room, the clean kitchen, the soft carpet. Everything here holds our memories. This is our home. It's not mine, I replied. Ethan's face darkened. He slammed his fist into the wall in frustration. You're really leaving me? Over a joke? That joke ended the moment you chose to protect her first. That was your last chance. He didn't understand. He thought it was all just a misunderstanding, that he had simply gone too far, trying to be funny, like he always did when we were younger. If you don't want to see her again, I'll block her. Right now. He pulled out his phone in a panic and opened his chat with Grace. I caught a glimpse of their messages. They'd still been texting, just seconds before he walked in. Realizing he'd been caught, he quickly deleted the conversation, forced a nervous laugh, and added her to his block list right in front of me. Then he held the phone up like a child showing off a chore finished. See? It's all clean. Gone. I didn't take the phone, I simply shook my head. This has nothing to do with me anymore. Ethan, maybe you didn't understand what I said at that ridiculous wedding, so I'll say it clearly now. We're done. I'm glad we never got the marriage license. That last sentence hit him like a death blow. His eyes reddened. He gripped my suitcase tighter, not wanting to let go. Lily, but isn't this our home? You're really gonna leave me all alone? For 4 years in college, we were so far apart and still didn't break up. Didn't we say we'd always be together? I didn't want to go back and forth with him anymore. I grabbed his hand and pulled it off me forcefully. In the process, I accidentally yanked off his watch. The black watch hit the floor with a thud, scattering loose parts everywhere. Have some dignity, Ethan. Stop reminding me. You and Grace have been walking a fine line for a while now. I've already played the fool once. You hate me? Fine. I don't hate you, but I also don't expect anything from you anymore. I don't know when you'll leave me again. I don't know when you'll decide I'm the enemy and jump to protect her instead. But here's the thing. I said with a bitter smile tugging at my lips. Even when I imagine you doing all that in the future, I don't feel sad at all. Do you know what that means? I asked. He understood. It meant I didn't love him anymore. We were truly over. His grip loosened. There was pleading in his eyes. That afternoon, I spent hours cleaning up my new apartment. The next day, I returned to work looking refreshed and full of energy. While delivering documents to Peyton, his gaze briefly flicked to my now bare ring finger. His eyes lingered a moment, then he looked away and said in a calm voice, "There's an overseas assignment next month. Our department has 2 slots. I recommended you. Take some time to think about it." An overseas assignment? I was stunned. When did you recommend me? Last week, he said. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, gentle, with a hint of warmth. Close the door on your way out, and good work. As I closed the door, it felt like a dream. That was the first time Peyton had ever smiled at me. I'd thought he was just a cold, indifferent boss. I still remembered the look on his face when he first noticed my missing engagement ring a while back. He didn't say a word, just frowned deeply, a trace of pity flashing through his eyes, like he was silently thinking, "Such a good woman. How could things end like this?" From that day on, he hadn't smiled again. We secretly started calling him the stoic one. In the otherwise stable, peaceful rhythm of my life now, Ethan was the only disgusting residue left. He called me non-stop. I blocked one number after another. Still not giving up, he began sending dramatic messages, pouring out his thoughts. I ignored him for a few days. Then, unable to hold back, he showed up with a huge bouquet of flowers, waiting outside my office building, smiling as I walked out. "Lily," he called, excited. "The watch has been fixed." That watch had always been the cheapest thing Ethan owned, but it was also the most meaningful. It was the most expensive gift I had ever given, bought with my hard-earned money from a part-time job. I could barely afford it, but I wanted him to have something special for his birthday. He had worn it for 7 years. Once, a friend of his mocked him for wearing such a cheap watch. Ethan's expression turned cold immediately. "This is the most valuable thing I own," he said. That shut his friend up fast. But it was also the watch he wore the night he stayed with Grace. Did he look at the time that night? Did he think about me waiting at home? I curled my lip. "That watch has nothing to do with me, and neither do you." Then I rode away on my little electric scooter without looking back. Ethan was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. His life had been smooth sailing. Maybe the only real hardships he'd ever faced were because of me. I didn't expect him to give up. To my surprise, he brought in reinforcements. When I received a message from Grace, I actually laughed out loud. The nerve. Still, I agreed to meet, just to see what kind of nonsense they were trying to pull this time. When we met, Grace looked pitiful and apologetic. "Ethan asked me to talk to you. To explain our relationship," she said. "Lily, there's really nothing going on between us. Ethan only got me into the company because we were classmates. I've already resigned. What happened at the wedding, that was a joke taken too far. I'm sorry. I know I was wrong." She looked at me, eyes pleading. "If you're willing to forgive me, to forgive Ethan, I'll do whatever you ask." She choked on her words as she cried, tears streaming down a pretty face. Beautiful girls crying. Of course Ethan would feel sorry for her. But me? I didn't have the heart for it anymore. "Really?" I said. "Even if you have to get on your knees?" Grace paused. After a long moment, she lifted her chin with fake righteousness. "As long as you're willing to forgive Ethan, I'll do it." "That's enough," I cut her off coldly. "Grace, must you be so dramatic?" Ethan's voice suddenly came through the phone Grace had left on the table. When I met her smug, triumphant gaze, I understood. This was all a setup. They were trying to manipulate me. I folded my arms. "He said you'd do anything. I'm just making one request, and you can't even handle that. If there's no sincerity, why bother asking me to come here?" Grace sneered, but her tone turned urgent. "Please, don't fight because of me. I'll kneel. I'll do it." She was just about to when the call abruptly ended. I raised an eyebrow. Grace puffed her chest, smug again. "I win. Ethan still can't let me go." I found it laughable. Why would I ever compete with you over a man I don't even want? All my life, I've competed. Grades, discipline, college, job interviews, but never over garbage. Grace's face darkened. "You're just bitter because you can't have him." I laughed. "Then why did he fire you?" That caught her off guard. "Oh," she said quickly. "Ethan didn't tell you? He knows I love fashion design. He opened a studio for me." A chill spread through my chest. No wonder she was smiling, because the joke was on me. I was the clown. Her voice was thick with patronizing pity. "And come on, you really believed we were just friends?" She leaned in slightly. "You remember the night of the campus shooting, when you called him?" I stared at her. "That night," she said, her tone light and cruel, "we were doing something fun. I told him not to pick up, and he didn't." She smiled, sweetly venomous. "Your parents were showing up at your school, trying to scam you for money. Didn't they even plan to kidnap you? You should thank me. If I hadn't made Ethan so happy that night, he wouldn't have felt guilty enough to come back and save you." She blinked innocently. "Poor thing, even your parents don't love you." Disgust hit me like a wave. How could anyone be this vile? That was my junior year. And it was after that event that I made the decision to legally separate myself from my birth family. I took the household registration book and officially changed my name, from Judy Zhou to Lily Zhou. Lily, Chunhui, spring sunshine. I wanted to become the sun of my own life. Ethan had stood by me, supported me, encouraged me through it all. But now I realized his unwavering support had been a cover for his guilty conscience. My fists clenched as nausea churned in my stomach. "You're both disgusting." Grace scoffed. "And who are you to judge us? Ethan came back to see you every time. Did you ever go see him? Did you know he was failing his classes? That he faced racial discrimination? That he was mugged?" Her voice rose, indignant, as if I had wronged her. "I was the one by his side when he struggled. What did you ever do? You wouldn't even buy a plane ticket. All you ever did was enjoy his love." I turned to look at Ethan, who had been sitting in the corner, who knew how much he'd heard. He stood, shakily, and stumbled forward, his whole body trembling. He looked like he wanted to speak, but didn't know where to begin. I looked at him, deeply confused. "All I ever did was enjoy your love? Is that what you really think, Ethan? Did I really never do anything for you?" I remembered staying up all night, watching online lectures just to help him with a course he didn't understand. I helped him organize his syllabus, walking him through it piece by piece. When he experienced racial discrimination, and I couldn't be by his side, I spent an entire week of every spare moment gathering research and wrote a detailed paper for him on how to deal with racism properly. When he was stuck on his thesis with no direction, I helped revise the structure, adjusting the academic framing and refining the terminology step by step. I did all of this for him. And yet, in his eyes, I only ever enjoyed his love. I looked at him with unfamiliar eyes, as if I were seeing him for the first time. "Ethan," I said, my voice low, steady, "you're disgusting. How are you even worthy?" I didn't have a visa. I had never been on a plane. The places he went I'd only seen in books. At the beginning of our long-distance relationship I was so anxious and uncertain, but he'd told me, no matter how far apart we are, nothing will ever fade my love for you. Ethan will always love Lily. By his third year abroad, that promise had expired. Turns out, promises only mean something when love is still alive. Once the feelings fade, they're worthless. I let out a cold laugh. "You two are perfectly matched. Trash attracts trash. Go enjoy each other. But why drag me down with you? What, you don't like long distance anymore? You don't like me anymore and you wanted to break up? Did you really think I would have clung to you, begged you to stay? You really overestimated your value and underestimated me. If you had just told me you couldn't control your desires and hooked up with garbage like her, I would have taken a cab and left without saying a word." I turned and walked away from them both. Even looking at them a second longer made me feel like I might explode. That same night, I told Peyton I accepted the overseas assignment. First, it was a great opportunity to grow. Second, Ethan and Grace had polluted the air in this city. I needed fresh air. While I was rushing around applying for my visa, I heard from a friend who had been at the wedding. Things between Ethan and Grace had completely fallen apart. Ethan demanded she return the 1 million yuan he had invested in her studio, and even threatened to sue. Grace didn't have the money. She cried, screamed, made a huge scene. But if her family could afford to send her abroad, how could she not pay him back? My friend explained, it was her ex-boyfriend who paid for her studies. He was rich and didn't care about the expense. But just before their wedding, he discovered Grace had secretly been dating Ethan during college. He immediately cut her off, financially and emotionally, leaving her unable to find work overseas. So she went back to Ethan. My friend said Ethan was stupid, that Grace had completely taken advantage of him. I replied sarcastically, "What is he, 3 years old? If this was mutual and we're assigning blame, Grace deserves 30 lashes, but Ethan deserves 70, and don't act like he's some innocent little puppy." I thanked my friend, then added, "But you don't need to update me anymore, I don't care." Still, a few days later, I heard Ethan had really gone through with the lawsuit. Grace couldn't repay the money and was officially blacklisted for defaulting on her debts. Not long after that, my visa was finally approved. Just before I left the country, I got a call from one of Ethan's friends, panicked. "Lily, please, you have to come to the hospital. Ethan's in the ER, alcohol poisoning." He said Ethan had been drinking like water since our breakup. I hung up. "Don't spread rumors, don't believe them." The next day, Ethan called me using someone else's phone. He sounded like nothing had happened. "Lily," he said softly, "I'm in the hospital. Didn't you say you'd bring me food every day if I ever got sick? I want to eat your porridge. I like whatever kind you make. When are you coming? I miss you so much. I thought when I opened my eyes, you'd be here." His voice was low and affectionate, filled with longing. I cut him off. "Ethan, stop playing dumb. Old promises don't count anymore." He was silent for a long time, then finally choked out, "So you're never gonna forgive me, are you?" "You've destroyed what I believed love could be," I sighed. "Anyway, I'm leaving." A boarding announcement echoed through the terminal, urging passengers to proceed to the gate. On the other end of the line, I heard shuffling, then Ethan's ragged breathing. "Lily Jo," he said, panicked. "Where are you going?" I scoffed. "Even a country bumpkin like me can go abroad." Then I hung up, took out my SIM card and boarded the plane. That was the start of a new chapter in my life. When I first landed, I was swamped, adjusting to the new environment, learning the job, finding my rhythm. It wasn't until about 2 weeks later that I settled into the local work pace and reconnected with my colleagues back home. We'd chat often and exchange gossip. One day, someone messaged me, "Your supervisor, Peyton, got into a fight at lunch." I was stunned. "With who? Peyton? Got into a fight?" I couldn't wrap my head around it. He always came to work perfectly groomed, his hair neatly styled, suits so crisp and ironed not a single wrinkle dared to appear. When faced with difficult problems, he'd instinctively furrow his brow and adjust his black-rimmed glasses with scholarly precision. He looked more like a university professor than a corporate manager. The idea of someone like that getting into a fight? Impossible. The contrast was wild. My colleague gasped. "Your ex-boyfriend?" I froze. "What?" Apparently people had recognized them. During the scuffle, my ex had yelled that Peyton was trying to steal his girl, and Peyton had shouted back, "You're not good enough for her." The tone in my coworker's voice turned gleeful, almost conspiratorial. "He was talking about you, right? Are you insane?" I laughed it off. "He probably just hates Ethan. Most people do." But that night, lying in bed, I tossed and turned. Peyton got into a fight with Ethan. Over me? I shook my head. No way. He probably just really disliked Ethan. And honestly, who could blame him? I ended up staying at the overseas branch for 2 years. Then, on the same day, I received a notification to return to headquarters and a congratulatory email for my promotion. When I got back, I finally had my own office. My mom lounged in my real leather chair, already plotting a 3-year general manager plan, a 5-year CEO track, and a future son-in-law who was tall, rich, and handsome. Just as I was imagining my path to world domination, someone knocked on the door. It snapped me out of my ambitious daydream. I cleared my throat and said, with mock authority, "Come in." The new department manager pushed open the door and, rare sight, actually smiled. "Long time no see. They've got milk tea for afternoon break today." In my 6th year after graduation, I bought my own 2-bedroom apartment. After walking out of the real estate office, I saw a tiny kitten at the entrance, tail curled, meowing its little lungs out. It looked to be about 2 months old, soaking wet, pale yellow fur clinging tightly to its skin. It was skinny, frail. My heart ached at the sight. I used tissues to gently dry her off and sat with her for 2 hours. Her mother never came. Finally, I reached out my hand and whispered, "Do you want to come home with me?" And then, something magical happened. She meowed sharply and crawled toward me, tail high in the air, voice shrill but determined. Then she flopped down on my shoe, curling around my shoelace, her tiny head wobbling with fatigue. My heart melted completely. I wrapped her in my jacket, picked her up, and gently stroked her little nose. "You don't have a mom or dad," I whispered. "Well, I don't either. Let's stick together from now on. Good night."